as a Miami Hurricane fan, I have to give my thoughts on the smackdown that Alabama gave Miami this past Saturday. Miami lost 44-13. Now, I at least thought that Miami could cover. I never felt like Miami was going to win the game. I didn't pick Miami to win the game, but I did think that Miami could at least make the game somewhat competitive because Miami was a 19-point underdog heading into that Saturday beatdown against Alabama. So I at least thought they could cover because I believe that this is the best team that the Miami Hurricanes have put on the field in a very long time. Better than that team that won 10 games with Malik Rozier under Mark Richt a couple of years ago and lost to Wisconsin in the Orange Bowl. I believe that this Miami Hurricanes team is better than that team. And even with this loss to Alabama, I'm still very confident in this team. I still believe that this is a team that could win 9 or 10 games and can win the Coastal. And I still think that this is the best Miami team that we've seen in a very long time. So this loss hasn't really changed anything about how I feel about this Hurricanes team. Now, I do know that a lot of Hurricane fans are extremely upset, and there are a good amount of Hurricane fans who want to fire Manny Diaz. And it seems like I have to give, this speech every single year when it comes to the Miami Hurricanes, because you did have a good amount of people out there who believe that Miami could beat Alabama. And this is what I have to tell you guys. Okay, listen. I don't think that Manny Diaz should be fired because of this loss. And as a matter of fact, if you watch my preview and prediction for this game, I actually said that this game is not going to define Manny Diaz and the Miami Hurricanes season. What I'm judging Manny Diaz and this Hurricanes team is not going to be based on this result that they had against Alabama. I'm judging this Hurricanes team and Manny Diaz performance based on what they do after Bama. What do you do against Appalachian State? What do you do against Michigan State? Okay, how are you going to fare against the rest of the ACC? And can you win the Coastal? That's what I'm judging Manny Diaz and Miami on this season. Not based on how competitive they're going to be against Alabama. Although it is pretty disappointing as a Hurricane fan myself that Alabama just steamrolled Miami. I thought Miami had a chance to somewhat be competitive for the first half because I thought that Alabama, with all of the players they lost to the NFL last year, having a freshman quarterback, that they kind of would come out a little bit rusty. Well, it seems like I underestimated Nick Saban. And one thing that everybody has to remember about Nick Saban is that when it comes to preparation, Alabama, the majority of the times, is always prepared. And when you look at Nick Saban's teams, there's not really a lot of week one matchups that you can say Nick Saban hasn't really had Alabama ready to play. So I feel like Alabama was a more prepared team than Miami. And that is something that a lot of Hurricanes fans have been very critical about when it comes to Manny Diaz, is that in big games, Manny Diaz seems to never really have the team prepared. And I do agree with that to some extent. I do feel like at least when it came to tackling, the team could have been a lot better in that department. But also you have Hurricanes fans out there who are saying it doesn't matter who we played. Miami should have performed better. Listen, this isn't Ohio State. It's not Clemson. This is Alabama, led by Nick Saban, the greatest head coach in college football history. And what I saw this past Saturday was a Alabama team that was just outright better than Miami. Okay, I'm not going to say that the offensive line hasn't improved. I'm not going to say that this team hasn't improved because you're going against Alabama. Okay, so we really can't give a fair assessment on this team until we actually see them against competition that is in Alabama. Because let me tell you guys something. Miami is not going to be the first or last team that is going to get steamrolled by Alabama this year. Alabama probably is going to steamroll everybody they played this year, just being honest. Their defense this year is outright nasty and it's scary. For everybody that was critical of the offensive line was going into this game with a lot of work cut out for them. You were going against a defensive line that had guys like Christopher Allen, Henry To'oTo'o, Christian Harris, Will Anderson. These are guys who are probably going to be first round picks. Miami's offensive line never really stood a chance, if we're just being honest. And same thing goes for Clemson. Clemson's offensive line didn't stand a chance against Georgia's offensive line. Clemson allowed 7, 8 sacks Saturday night. So I don't think it's fair to just predetermine that the offensive line hasn't improved based on going against Alabama's defense, because Alabama's defense is a different animal. Now, yeah, you would have liked to see a better performance, but overall, I want to see how Miami's offensive line fares against the rest of the competition they play, because if we're being honest, Miami will probably never face a defense or a front seven like Alabama's for the rest of the season, and I can put money on that. Maybe until you play Clemson, but even then, Clemson's defensive line is good and their defense is good, but it's not on par as Alabama. Alabama is stacked at every single position. So, I mean, I'm not really judging Miami's offensive line based on what they did against Alabama, because that essentially was the second best defensive line in all of college football behind Georgia. So, of course, there was kind of going to be a mismatch there. And on top of that, everybody's saying that Manny Diaz didn't have this team prepared, and I do understand that to a degree, but at the same time, what I watched on Saturday wasn't a team that lost just because they weren't prepared. I saw a team that lost because Alabama was just outright better. Alabama was just the more better team at every single stage, special teams, offense, and defense. Now, I thought the defense could have performed way better. The defense underperformed. That's where I'm the most disappointed at, because you look at this defense. This defense has a lot of experience in the secondary. You had guys blowing coverages. You have guys not knowing where to go. You had guys missing tackles, and that's just something that you shouldn't see from a team on the defense side of football that has the experience that Miami has in the back end of that secondary. You also have Manny Diaz, who is a defensive-minded coach. I just felt like the defense should have been more prepared, and I do agree with a lot of you Hurricanes fans out there who like to say that Manny Diaz doesn't have this team prepared in big games, because I definitely do understand that to a degree, and I do agree with that. Okay, because like if you're a defensive-minded coach, the defense should not be one of the worst areas of your team. It should be your strong suit. I don't think Alabama should just have been able to come out guns blazing with a freshman quarterback and new players and new faces on offense and just be able to go up and down the field on Miami's defense. I felt like Miami's defense should have had somewhat of a resistance than what they did. So you look at the offense, and everybody was criticizing Rhett Lashley's play calling. I don't know why, for the life of me, teams in third and long situations choose to run the football. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. I know maybe if you're going for it on fourth, that'll make sense to run the ball, but I really don't understand why teams run the football on third down. And I do feel like Rhett Lashley's play calling was really questionable in that game, especially in the first quarter. But sometimes I think Rhett Lashley kind of calls plays in the first quarter to kind of test out the defense to see what works and what he can come back to later in the game, because normally good play callers normally like to test out certain plays and certain formations at the start of the game, and then depending on what works, they will come back to it at a different point of the game, maybe out of a different formation or whatnot. But that's what I kind of feel Rhett Lashley was doing. I kind of felt like Miami kind of had a game script. Normally you have teams in the first game that kind of script out what plays they're going to run, and nothing really worked. And, you know, you can blame the play calling. I do feel like Rhett Lashley had a really bad game when it came to calling plays, but also on top of that, you know, nothing really worked. And a lot of people were saying, well, Miami was out schemed. I mean, like, scheming in college football doesn't really work how you guys think it is, okay? This isn't the NFL. In the NFL, you don't really have a big talent differential, okay? The biggest difference in talent between one of the best teams in the NFL and one of the worst teams in the NFL is probably 14 points. In college football, talent differential definitely matters, okay? And if you don't have a talented football team that's equal to a Alabama or whatnot, then most of the time what you call isn't going to work. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, JT, Minnesota had a better time against Ohio State, and Ohio State's not Alabama. Ryan Day is not Nick Saban. You guys have to look at the fact that Nick Saban is on a different tier than every single body else in college football. You can't compare Ohio State to Alabama. Alabama would have smothered Ohio State if they played this week. So, I mean, when you look at Miami in general, you were just outmatched physically, mentally, and talent-wise. Okay, now is Alabama a better team than Miami 44-13 wise? I mean, that's debatable. I still feel like Miami could have lost that game in a better way than what they did. I still felt like Miami could have covered. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to say that Miami needs to fire Manny Diaz because of this performance. I'm not going to trip off this game because I never really expected Miami to win this game. And when I did my prediction, I had Miami losing this game by 10 points. Okay, so I'm not really giving this game much thought. I just felt like this game was a good test to see how far Miami is from the blue bloods of college football. And obviously, as we can tell from the result and the smackdown that went down Saturday, that Miami has a very long ways to go. But then what really upsets me the most is that you have these Miami Hurricane fans who go on Twitter and they talk about, I remember when the U used to mean something, I remember when Miami used to be so good in the 80s, the 90s, and 2000s, like Manny isn't the guy to get us back to that point. Like, a lot of people have to understand something, okay? This isn't the goddamn 80s, 90s, or the fucking 2000s. This is 2021, people. This isn't 2002. This isn't 1984. This isn't the 90s. We are in the year of 2021. Miami is not that program anymore. Miami realistically is a program that should be winning 8 to 9 games every single season. That's what Miami is. Miami is not a national championship contending team like they used to be in the 90s, the 80s, and the early 2000s. People have to realize this. So your expectations this season and every year are solely based on what happened 2-3 decades ago. You have to stop. And when a lot of you Miami Hurricanes fans and you Nebraska fans and you USC fans and you Texas fans realize this, you will be more at peace. You will have more, centered expectations. Like, I feel like there's a lot of Miami Hurricane fans out there who just have their expectations every single season for how good Miami should be based on what Miami used to be. You have to temper your expectations. Miami is not the same program that they were in the early 2000s or the damn 90s. They're not. And for all you guys who want to fire Manny Diaz and try to find a coach who can bring that back or get Miami back to that stage, I mean, what coach are you going to be able to find that can do that? I mean, be honest. Miami still is a very desirable job. Okay, nobody's denying that. But Miami isn't a program that can get a Luke Fickell from Cincinnati. They're not a program that's going to be able to get the coach from Louisiana Raging Cajuns. They're not that program. You're not going to be able to get a elite caliber head coach. You're going to end up getting a very solid G5 coach, or you're either going to be getting a very solid coordinator. You're not going to be able to get a Bob Stoops out of retirement. You're not going to be able to lure an Urban Meyer out of retirement or something like that. I know Urban Meyer currently is the head coach of Jacksonville Jaguars, but I'm just using that as an example. You're not going to get just this elite head coach from these different programs. At best, you're going to get a very solid G5 head coach. Because if we're being honest, I mean, like, how good of a job is Miami? It's not one of the best jobs in America. It's a very solid job in terms of location because you have easy access to recruiting in Florida. Like, if Miami is going to get back on top, they're going to do with a coach that we haven't really heard that much about. You're not going to be able to bring in an elite head coach. You're damn sure not going to bring Mario Cristobal from Oregon. Like, there's still people who believe that Mario Cristobal will leave Oregon for Miami. Are you fucking drunk? You really believe that Mario Cristobal is going to leave Oregon? Oregon is a pretty much borderline college football playoff contender. And you think he's going to leave that for Miami? Absolutely not. So when you look at Miami right now, and I apologize for the profanity, but I just have to really use those strong words and strong language to really describe how I feel because, like, it really frustrates me how people make their expectations solely based on what happened years ago. Expectations have to change. You have to get in tap with reality. And the reality of the Miami Hurricanes football program in 2021 is that they're not national championship contenders like they used to be in the 90s, the 80s, and the freaking early 2000s. They're not. People have to get in tap with reality. People have to stop living in the past. People have to stop. You have to be in tap with what's going on right now. You have to be. Okay, things change, people change, expectations go up and expectations go down. Expectations have to be changed based on performance. And based on the performance of the Miami Hurricanes football program, nobody should be expecting this team to consistently be a championship contender. Miami's football program is at a state now that they should consistently win 8 to 9 games a season. Occasionally you have a bad year where maybe you only win 7 games, but most of the time you should be winning 8, 9 games, and then occasionally you have a peak year when you win 10 games and make a New Year's 6 bowl game or maybe better. That is the state of the Hurricanes football program. This isn't a Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State where you should be contending season after season. This is a program that is around 8 to 9 wins every single year. And if Manny Diaz can win 8, 9 games consistently year after year after year, I have no problem with him still being the head coach for the Miami Hurricanes. Because Miami hasn't really been the most consistent program. We haven't really had a coach who has been able to consistently win 8, 9 games. We've had coaches who've had some good years when they've won 9 games or 10 games, and then after that they just fall off. There hasn't really been any consistency. So if Manny Diaz is a coach that can consistently win 8, 9 games, I have no problem with that. Because there's been plenty of coaches over the last couple of years who have just had one good season and then they just fall off. Miami hasn't really been a consistent program. For Miami to ever get back to what, a lot of you Miami Hurricanes fans wanted to be back in the early 2000s and 90s, you have to have stability at coaching. And it's not going to be firing a coach every single 3 years because, first of all, that's not going to help recruiting. You really think recruits are going to want to play for a school that fires their coach every 3 years? Recruits want to play for the same coach that recruited them to their program. Nobody wants to play for a team that always runs through new head coaches every single 3 years. Come senior season, they have a new head coach that they're going to be looking at. Nobody wants that. So if Manny Diaz can win 8, 9 games this year, have no problem with that. But I really think that my expectations this season for Miami is still to win the Coastal. Nothing is changing. I feel this season Miami should win at least 9 or 10 games and win the Coastal. Now, if Manny Diaz wins 8 games, okay, that's a really disappointing season. All right? But 8 games isn't 8 wins isn't, a season that Manny Diaz should be fired. Because, quite frankly, that's the level of expectations that realistically should be in place for Miami. And you can give the crap about the recruiting and all that bull crap. At the end of the day, Miami is an 8, 9 win program at this point. And that's just being realistic. And that's just coming from a diehard Hurricanes fan. So when you look at Miami, nobody really should be all that. I mean, yeah, I'm upset. Not as much as a lot of you Hurricanes fans watching this probably are. But, I'm not bent out of shape about it. Because at the end of the day, I knew that Miami was going to beat Alabama. I'm not comparing Miami to Bama. It's a good test to see how far Miami is to, a blue blood program, and it's a good test. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to judge Miami season and Manny Diaz performance based on what they do the next following games. What you do against Appalachian State, Michigan State. If Miami loses to Michigan State or Appalachian State, then hell yeah, we have a problem. But Miami still should win the Coastal. And I still think that this is the best team that the Miami Hurricanes have put on the field in a very long time. So I don't think it's time to fire Manny Diaz. I still think Miami's going to have a really good season. You just went against the best team in America. And I promise you that this will not be the first or last time Alabama blows out an opponent in the fashion that they did Miami this past Saturday.